Welcome, everybody. Jerry Mathis here, Beck's field agronomist in South Dakota. Joining me again is Dale Victoria from Eastern Minnesota, and we're here to talk to you about a little bit more on the biological side of things, and I think a little bit more on the how, and how do we use that and things like that. Dale, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So Jerry, last time we talked about biologicals and why they're so important and also biostimulants. And I think we kind of got a good handle on that. We know they have some value, but for me, I think about it from my farmer's hat perspective going, okay, made sense what you were talking about, but now what do I do? Right. So I like to think of farming in segments, and I think about, all right, first pass that we're making now is with that planter, right? And is there a way that we can implement some of these biologicals, biostimulants with our planter? Now, the big thing is there's a variety of different setups we have in the planter. We got some growers that do not have a liquid system. Some growers do. So I want to look at, can we kind of tailor this biological world to both segments of planters, those with dry or with liquid and those without. So, I think about the guys that are not running a liquid system of any source. We look at what can we do without a liquid system, Jerry? What have we looked at in PFR, and what could we implement?
So one of the easiest things that a guy can do is add a box treatment. So one of the things that we've done in our PFR studies, and some of them are PFR proven, is we're adding other biologicals or nutrients to that box treatment, if you will. And so one of the things that we've seen is anything that we've tested has typically been better than just using talc and graphite. So we've got several different products like GrowPack and that they all work and give a positive return. So when we start looking at investment, you don't really have to have much of an investment. You're going to put something on that costs a little bit more than your normal talc and graphite, which you're going to use anyway, but you're getting your money back on that in the form of yield. So what other things, box treatment wise, or what else would you add onto that, looking at it from that perspective, Dale?
Yeah. So when I look at it from that dry perspective or just that box treatment, like you said, there's been many products that we've tested that have shown some really good responses. On page 23, you can look at some of the PFR proven ones. So remember, that's something that's been tested for at least 3 years, multi-location, and gives us a positive response. You mentioned one of them is GrowPack, also Seed Plus Graphite. Both of those became PFR proven this last year in 2023. So that's pretty good. Then we can look at our multi-location studies, and we tested numerous other ones, Hopper Throttle, Stride Bio, things like that. And to your point, they all gave us a positive ROI. In a lot of cases, it's on the corn side. We saw north of 3 bushels on most anything we used above and beyond talc graphite mix. But I will say one thing when we start talking about these replacement products for talc and graphite. You mentioned we're adding a biological or a stimulant of some sort with some nutrition on some of these. Coverage is key, not only just to make the product work better, but also the flowability within the planter. So if you're looking at just sprinkling them on the top of the unit, you may have some issues with that. So I'd strongly consider looking at, if you have a talc applicator on a seed tender or something like that, utilize it. Or also just look at how can you better mix it than just sprinkling on top of your boxes or your center fill. So I think that's the big thing. But when you talk about that ROI, it's pretty good. Yes, these products cost more than just your standard 80-20 graphite talc mix, right? But when we look at it, to your point, Jerry, we look at some of the ROI on them. We're gaining a couple bushels, and we look at the true ROI. In most cases, it's a double-digit return back in your pocket. 10, 12, $18 an acre. That's pretty good, and it's kind of, I like things that are fairly simple. something that can kind of go along with the pass. All right. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the dry.
Okay. And I agree. I mean, you don't have a lot of money invested, but you want to make sure that we got good coverage and that it works. For the guys that have a liquid system, there's a number of different liquid products out there, and there's more probably biostimulants as well as actual biologicals that are in a liquid form that you typically can add right to your starter program and make that work. The one thing I would caution anybody is to make sure you read and follow the label direction. That is probably the one thing that might get a guy into trouble. If you're going to spend the money, the biggest thing I'm going to tell you is to make sure you have that biology alive when it gets to the soil and to keep it alive when it's in the soil. And one of those cheap biological or biostimulants, if you will, that I look at is a cheap carbon source, typically in the form of a sugar. There's a lot of different products out there, whether it's humic acid, fulvic acid, things like that are carbon-based, but that is one of the cheaper ones that a guy can put out there typically and see some pretty good responses. We start looking at some of the other biologicals that we add to that. There again, how they're used and where they're used, I think is part of that. I think we start looking at soil types. We look at things like that and pay attention to it. Pay attention to where they are working and where they may not be working. What other insights do you have for that, Dale?
Yeah, no, you make a lot of valid points there, Jerry. I will just mention when you start looking at some of those additional products to your pop-up fertilizer, with your in-furrow or with your 2x2x2, whatever system you have on your planner, you can refer to page 51 and page 53 in the PFR book. And those, once again, those are the proven ones, been tested multiple years, multiple locations that can kind of give you maybe a little better guideline of what's going to ROI a little bit better. Your point about the biostimulants, I think that is very important when we look at that difference between the biostimulant and a biological. We talked about that before. That biostimulant is dead. It's the food source. The biological is living. So your point, Jerry, about if we're putting a biological product into a salt bath, and when I talk about a salt bath, it's you think about if you're using 1034O or in furrow or 624-6, or if you're going off the row in a 2x2x2 scenario, maybe you're using a UAN formulation of some sort. Jerry's 100%, you're right, man, is look at those labels because we want those things alive when they hit where we're putting them, right? So for some, when we look at that, maybe the biostimulant might be an easier spot for you to look at, okay? Because there's a little less concern about killing it because you can't kill it, right? It's already dead. It's a food source. So that's what I think is if we're looking at this biological space and this biostimulant space, I like to start easy and make sure that we're not going to cause a lot of headaches to our operation. So I may be more willing to lean on the biostimulant to start with and get you comfortable with it if you're looking at putting it in that starter scenario. Okay. That's my 2 cents, Jerry, on that.
Okay. And I'm going to agree. We need to make sure that where we're spending money, we're getting the return out of it. And that's one of the things that if you haven't done that and you want to try a field or whatever, I've suggested to some guys, I said, when you get close to the last half of a field that you're planting, sometimes if it mixes easy, just go pour it in because you're going to have a pretty good study that way. And, there's a lot of test plots out there, whether we realize it or not, that guys are doing, and they just need to pay attention to that and take that information home with them and gain some information from that to see whether they're going to use that across the entire farm the next year. With that, I think we'll call that a conclusion for the microbial activity or the microbial products that we've been talking about here. Thank you very much for listening. And if there are other questions, please reach out to Dale or myself or any other Beck's employee on some of these things. And have a great day. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Stay safe, everybody.